Hey guys, I'm excited to kick off the very next series, I guess you could call it, on my channel here called Let's Build with Tailwind. And this is going to focus on creating sites based around Tailwind CSS. So if you're new to Tailwind CSS, it's a utility-first CSS framework for building user interfaces, and it's a different approach to using CSS in your stack. So traditionally, if you're used to something like Bootstrap or Foundation, for example, it comes with predefined classes that basically look and theme components in your app. So buttons and all of that, it's just kind of look the same no matter what installation of Bootstrap or Foundation you have across any application you're using. So the secret to Tailwind is it's unopinionated by design, and more or less you construct components with these small utility classes as opposed to something that's pre-built. Although you can build components using a collection of these at will. So this is an example of that on the documentation. So this series is going to be more or less front-end focused. I've been doing a lot of back-end plus front-end on the channel, and I wanted to kind of get into more of the design side of it too. So this is design oriented, but it is for people who are looking to scale up projects fast. And I think Tailwind is a great use case for that. There is a gotcha right now that the current version is 0.74, and there's actually a 1.0 release on the horizon. It's actually in beta 3 right now. So this video, I'm going to walk you through how to actually install that. I actually had to update a few recent projects from the version 7.4 to version 1. It's kind of a mind-numbing process because there's a lot of renaming conventions to some class names that you use a lot, but it is doable. So if you have to do that, just follow this guide on Adam Wathan's GitHub page. But despite that, there's just a small amount of changes in terms of the configuration, as well as just the class naming conventions that you get out of the box with this framework. So it does a lot of things, doesn't do some things too. So certain CSS, it's not meant to be the holy grail of CSS. So you will need to write custom CSS in some cases, but the idea with this is that you won't be constantly adding new CSS to your stack, and I think that's pretty valuable in my opinion. I could see this being most useful for large applications or even apps that you want to get off the ground running fast, where you don't need to hire a designer. Or if you hire a designer, you can work combined as a group to create something that's still approachable from both parties. So let's install this first. This first video will just be kind of walking you through the framework, installation, and then going from there. So we'll start building components at first, and then maybe taking it steps further to build apps or like actual pages and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and start. Unfortunately, at this time, the actual documentation is going to have the versions and stuff I want to use because I want to use the latest and greatest. So I'm actually going to use the beta 3 here. What I want to do is follow the guide here on the beta 1 README. And there's an actual installation where you can target the next version of Tailwind CSS, which will get the latest beta version. So before we get started, I want to go and find the docs, and often there's a installation boilerplate we can make use of. I typically use this stuff in a Rails environment, so chances are like processing and stuff is all set up for you in a framework like that. But in our case, I want to use a kind of a template that Adam created as a go-to. I'm trying to find it first. Here it is, Webpack starter template. I'll go get that. And this is older, but it's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and download that, and we'll open this. I'll use VS Code this time around. I've been using Sublime Text for so long, but I've been slowly transitioning to VS Code. There's things I like and don't like about it. At the moment, this has an old Tailwind config. I'm actually going to get rid of it, everything in it right now, and save it as a blank file. We will need to rename this as tailwind.config. For the new 1.0 release, that's a big change. And then post CSS, we need to update this to point to that file too. So config, like so. Okay, and Webpack is gonna kind of just do the same randomness we need. I don't really need all of this stuff really, but I can just do a yarn install to get that going. So if you're interested in seeing this installed in a Rails project, I can do that too. Maybe even Laravel. I'm not a huge Laravel user, but I probably could set that up and just to see how it works on that type of framework. So then with that downloaded, we can view this bit and go ahead and start the process of installing the 1.0 beta. The main thing I want to do is update the config file. That's going to be a new default. As you see here, there's a link to it. And this one here, default config.stub. We get the raw of that, copy that in. Go to the config, pass that, paste that in. And you're gonna, if you're used to a Tailwind in the past, you'll notice this is a different kind of way it's authored in terms of the config. You will notice also the class names have been modified. Instead of like light and lighter, they're now number based, which is kind of a big change, and one I'm not terribly fond of, but I get it. There's a couple more shades of each color now, which is good, but also more colors you might not even use. The default stack is now the sans stack, which is good for fonts. But other than that, the same stuff still exists that you're used to. Just a couple new naming convention changes. So let's go ahead and double check everything's set. Okay, so with that done, we would need to actually add Tailwind now. So let's go and find that release doc again, and we want to add Tailwind like so. So yarn add with the dependency or dev of tailwind.css at next. At next is important if you're installing the latest beta. Otherwise, if this is current and it's version 1's out, you can just do a yarn add / capital D Tailwind CSS. So we'll add that to our file. That'll get appended into our package.json, which will be a dependency we use. You'll see it right here now. Beta 3, which is what we want. Okay, and then we can double check that our styles have this as a basic setup. One thing changed here, that the pre-flight is now called base. I'll show you in the guide here. Yeah, it's right here. It used to be called pre-flight, so I'm going to just rename that to base. And I believe it should be close. I think aside from that, that should be the main stuff. If you're coming from a brand new project and installing it the first time, I think that's the gist of what you need to do. Coming from a pre-existing Tailwind project, there's a lot more to do. You need to rename some class names, set up different breakpoints if you use those, or add inline to certain elements that were already displayed block by default. Your default font families, all your headings need certain boldness if you don't already set that up. But if you're new to it, then you're in luck. So let's go ahead and I think let's check the package JSON. He just did dev there. Okay, so we'll just do yarn dev to boot up the server. So at localhost 8081, we can see there's our starter template. Let's see if we can change some stuff around in here. See if text purple is old. So if we say text purple 500, there it goes. So purple, just to show proof of concept. Green, and let's say like 800. There it is. Could say the body class BG green 200. real light green. So as you can see, that's as quick and easy as it works. Using that starter template's a great way to get started. If you're not already in a framework like Rails or something like that, where you have Webpacker or some sort of Webpack instance, you can install it using other setups like Gulp or Laravel. Mix, for instance. Mix looks pretty promising. It does stuff just simply, you just chain it almost like Gulp, which is great. And then Webpack, it's more, I find Webpack more confusing to set up, but it gets the job done, and it's kind of the trend these days. So if you can lean that direction, I definitely recommend it. This is a quick video to get this series kicked off. I wanted to take the next sets of videos to actually dive in and build things. Like I said, we're using the beta version at this point, and I want to be current. So if you're using an older version, stuff will still apply to you. If you're using an older version of Tailwind, you just might use different class names than I do. And that's perfectly fine, but just use your best judgment in terms of the look and feel. And from there, we'll just kind of continue on. So I look forward to the future stuff to come. If you have any requests of things to build with Tailwind, I'm happy to hear those out and consider them. All right. Thanks, guys. Peace. Hello Rails is my new course on Ruby on Rails. I'll teach you Ruby on Rails from the ground up. Visit hellorails.io for more information.